Welcome back to the Investor Professor podcast. This is Dr. Ryan Peckham, and this is episode 41. Now, normally for each episode, I have kind of a topic that I want to discuss, and today, my mind is just busy. I got like 1,000 thoughts running through my head, and so a lot of these topics that I want to discuss aren't really long enough to kind of have their own episode. So I'm just going to put them all out here. Hopefully, these are some of the things that you've thought about, thinking about, but really this is just kind of a culmination of just a busy mind today, a lot of stocks, a lot of numbers running through my head. And so I'm just going to be a little bit more free-spirited today and just put them all out there. So let's do this. Let's get to work. All right. Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. Appreciate you joining me. Got a couple thoughts I want to share with you just on podcasting in general, just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this is to even be trying this. We kind of we have been consistently hitting between 75 and 100 downloads per week, which I think is pretty good. I kind of looked at it as, okay, how many students do I teach during a semester? Can I get past that number and do it on a consistent basis? But I got an email this week from somebody that's in the podcasting industry just talking about the numbers of how many podcasts there really are. And I got to tell you, I never really thought about it. I knew there was a lot of podcasts out there, right? But the sheer number, when you see it, is a little bit daunting. And so, Spotify said it added 1.2 million podcasts last year, and there's over 2.4 million podcasts in Apple. And so after the shutdown of the pandemic, they were constantly having over 100,000 podcasts added every single month. So the number of these podcasts it's just a massive, massive number. And so when you sit here as an individual, you go, good goodness, why would I ever even start? Right? Why would I ever even start this? So I went and I looked at Apple's podcast numbers, and it is. There's 2.4 million on Apple Podcasts. But what's interesting is that 80% of those are inactive. 80%. So only 20% of podcasts are actually active, meaning that they've published an episode in the last 90 days. I think that's how they define it. Yeah, that's right. So the last 90 days, they haven't done anything. And it kind of comes down to if you've been a student of mine, or if I was lucky enough to teach you in person, I talk about the 80-20 rule all the time, right? And it constantly keeps coming up again in my life, right? So here you look at podcasts, 80% of podcasts are inactive. If you look at a company, if you work in a company, 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. If you own a business, 80% of your income is going to come from 20% of your customers. It's just this 80-20 rule just goes around and around. And here again, it kind of shows itself, but it's a little bit interesting. I'm kind of glad I never knew these numbers before I started this, because I probably wouldn't have, when you look and you see how much competition is really out there, sometimes being naive can be a blessing. I think that kind of in my life, I've always been naive. I do not think about what other people are doing, what other investment people are doing, other people that are starting businesses. I really, really try to stay in my own lane and just concentrate on what I'm doing, because I really feel like, if I'm persistent, if I'm persistent and consistent, then things will work out how they're supposed to. Not meaning that things will blow up or that it'll be super successful, but that you'll actually give yourself a chance. And I think that you have to think about that, because especially today, when you look on social media or everywhere, right, it's everybody's highlight reel. And so you think, man, I would never be able to do that. And it's just not true. It's just not true. So with that being said, I think about different moments, right? Your life is going to have different moments, and moments that will change your life. You will get your chance. And so if you're studying, if you're working, if you're building your business, if you're working on your personal goals, you have to understand that one day it's going to be your day and that you have to be ready for it. And so when I think about my business and starting out, like I can definitely pick out the points where like I knew that like this was going to be a big moment and like I had to be ready for it. And like all the reading I had done, all the studying I had done, if I could just get this particular client or get them to trust me, that it would be a game changer for me. And so I really remember like the one that was like the one that kind of broke me, which I had my business for a couple years. I was working a couple other jobs. I was working for a bank. I was teaching at night. And when I was working for the bank that I worked for, I never talked to the banking customers about my investment practice. It would have been a conflict of interest. And I didn't want to kind of get in that mess. So I was just slowly building it on the side. Well, I had a customer of mine that I knew pretty well that was going to have a liquidity event, meaning that they were going to sell their business and for a substantial amount of money. And I thought to myself, this is it. Like, this is the moment. Like, you have to be prepared for this. Like, how do I get in front of them and tell them that I've been doing all this stuff, and see if they'll trust me and pick me as their, investment person? And so I got them to go to lunch with me. And I basically, in the most honest way possible was like, look, I've been doing this at night. I've been studying stocks since I was 16 years old. I started my own company, years ago. I've never told y'all about it or anybody about it. But I know that you have this event coming up where you're going to sell your business. And I just want you to know, like, I would love to be your investment person. And so they said, okay, well, we appreciate it. They were kind of taken aback by it. Obviously, they didn't know. And I mean, this was my big chance. And so we'll call you back, in a day or two and let you know. Well, they called me back in about 3 hours and said, you're going to be our guy. And come to find out, like, they had met with a lot of big brokerage firms, a lot of fancy, the names that and nobody made them feel comfortable. And that's kind of one of the misnomers is that, people go in and they talk to investment people and they talk over their heads and they act like they know a lot more than they do, and people feel very uncomfortable. And so they normally end up they don't go with those people. But they were able to recognize that, I'd put a lot of time in and for some reason trusted me, but I knew, like, at that moment when I heard about them selling their business, I was like, okay, this is going to be one of those moments for me. Like, this is going to be one of those moments and I have to take advantage of it. What can I do to take advantage of this moment? And you don't get too many of these moments in your life. Like, they don't come around all the time. And so if you're busy studying or you're working on whatever you're working on, your side business or your real business, whatever it is, you just have to trust that you're going to get a couple of those moments, and you got to prepare yourself to take advantage of those. And so one of the things to go with these moments is I notice other people's moments, and I kind of get excited when they have theirs, right? Whenever you're watching Olympic athletes or, I'm older, so watching Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and them do the Super Bowl halftime show. I mean, I'm excited for them because you have to realize how much work led up to that moment for them to kind of get that. And so when you think about what's going on in the news today and you see the Chris Rock, Will Smith thing, to me, and there's been a lot of people comment on this, I mean, it kind of fills me with sadness because you think about Will Smith, like, he ruined his own moment, right? He ruined his own moment, something he's worked so hard for. He couldn't keep his emotional brain, intellectual brain, whatever you want to call it. Like, he couldn't, handle it, or he couldn't hold it together. I shouldn't say handle it. He couldn't hold it together, and he ruined his own moment. And for me, I'm like, ugh, man, it's just crushing to me because, like, forever it will be associated with what was supposed to be a great moment for him and a lot of other people. And so there's a learning lesson there that, man, you got to be able to handle yourself when your moment comes along, because you just don't get that many of them. and you can ruin them. You can ruin them. So you have to be very careful, and you have to be self-aware enough to know this is going to be a big moment for me, right? And the things that you visualize, I know a lot of you, when you were in college, you visualized, walking across the stage. I did that too. You watch yourself, you think about yourself in these moments. And so then you go after them. That's what you have to hold on to and celebrate other people's moments along the way. Right. So there's an old book called Think and Grow Rich. It was originally published in 1937 by Napoleon Hill. But it really talks about how, what you think about, your brain starts working. Right. So if you think about goals, if you think about, whether it's building a portfolio or making more money or starting a business, right? If you're thinking about those things, then, that's how your brain's going to work. Right. So you think about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says, don't think about, I can't afford that. Think about, how can I afford that? So your brain starts working on a solution. It's the same thing in these, when you're thinking about your moments and the things that you're trying to achieve. So when we look at the stock market this week, you'll see that, it's kind of a, up down market. The NASDAQ was again down this week. It's now, I think it dropped 4% this week. So we're down minus 12 now for the year. And there's a lot of stocks getting beat up. So the big turn this week was that some of the people in the Fed that were for not raising interest rates as fast are now have now moved over and want to raise rates more aggressively. So the last time the Fed was this kind of together on raising interest rates was around October, November of 2018, which seems like a lifetime ago. But during that time, the Fed was raising rates aggressively, and the NASDAQ got absolutely destroyed from October 2018 to Christmas Eve of that year. I think it dropped 22%. So pretty brutal. So when you look at some of these stocks, they're just starting to get annihilated. And I just want to give you some of the stocks that are on my radar. It's perfect time. I'm not your financial advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult your financial advisor before making any investments, and past performance is not indicative of future results. I think I'm getting good at just weaving that in here, like, at the end of a commercial or something. All right. So some of the stocks I'm looking at, and I'm going to tell you why I'm looking at these. So one of them is DOCU. Been absolutely beat up. Right. So in July of last year, it was $300 a share. It's now at 101. So with rates moving up, right, interest rates moving up, the industry that it's going to have the most impact on the quickest is going to be real estate, because obviously people are not going to buy houses. They're not going to refinance. And we're already seeing, we're already seeing that. And so when you look, refinances are already down 60%, and new home buys are already down 40% since rates have moved up. And we know that rates are going to move up again in May. And so DocuSign's gone from 300 to 100. And I think that the damage is not done yet, because the number one industry that DocuSign works with, you guessed it, real estate. So the lowest that DocuSign has gotten here has been $73, and it might test that low again. But this is one of those companies where I do think that long-term DocuSign will look pretty good, but it's going to be some more pain, I think. It's going to be some more pain. But it's definitely one that I want to look at if it does get just completely beat up, that I could buy and look at, holding for the next 5 years. So one of the other ones is RH. And I actually started making some purchases for some people this week on RH. So RH is used to be, they switched to RH. I don't really know why. It's Restoration Hardware. And so you look at their 1 year chart, they've gone from $722 to $335. It's another one that's been cut in half. Their PE ratio now is 15. Obviously, it was at 30 or even higher than that. And so they just announced a 3-for-1 stock split, but that's another one. So obviously, if you know Restoration Hardware, it's expensive furniture for people who make a lot of money. And so normally the luxury brands actually hold up better because the people who are buying that stuff are not getting as beat up as other people. But when I look at them, I look and say, okay, this looks to be a little overdone. I think that at some point, the shares could find a bottom, and I think that we're getting close to that. In October of 2020, they were 335, which is exactly where they're at. And so, with purchasing this one, I look to put a stop in place at probably $300 a share. But I do think that you're getting to where this one, not to say it can't get more beat up. It obviously everything can go lower. When people say it can't go any lower, oh yes, it can. It can go to zero. It can go to zero. So don't tell yourself it can't go any lower. It can definitely go lower. But you look at them, you look at Goldman Sachs. This one looks even more compelling to me. So Goldman Sachs, the investment bank, it's already dropped about 25%. Back in November, it was $423. Now it's $321. It has a PE ratio of 5. Geez, that's low. A dividend of 2.5%. And Goldman Sachs, some of the banks are getting beat up because obviously there's not going to be as many M&A activity this year. That's mergers and acquisitions. There's not going to be as many companies going public because the market isn't doing as well. So some companies will hold off. They have the largest investment bank in the world. And of course, there's a lot of geopolitical stuff going on with Russia, Ukraine. So that part of their business is going to, obviously, it's going to slow down this year. But they are part of the Dow Jones. And I think long term, that is going to be, this looks to be, I think if you're willing to hold it for a while, this is going to be a stock that's going to be pretty good. And as I talked about last week, you're getting a dividend and you're going to get paid to wait. So let's look at one of the ones I've talked about in previous episodes. It's called Plains All American Pipeline. The symbol for this one is PAA. And I don't know what it was when we talked about it. It might have been like $8 or $9 a share. It's currently at 11, and it now pays. They just announced that they're raising their dividend 21%. Not that they're paying 21%. They're raising their dividend 21% to 87 cents a share. But when you talk about a stock that's $11.15 and they're paying you 87 cents a share, that is a dividend yield of 7.8%. That is pretty good. And so they get paid for having oil go through their pipeline. Think about a toll road for the oil and gas business. It's a pretty good business to be in. And so there are some opportunities out there. And I think, again, and I'm going to beat this up completely, but when you're buying stocks for your portfolio right now, quit thinking about what they're going to be worth in 3 months or 3 weeks. Think about what they're going to be worth in 3 years, right? When times are not good, that is when you have to plant seeds for your future. So if you're younger, you should be really excited that the market isn't doing very well. And, in rising interest rate environments, the market typically does not do that well. All right, especially your high-flying stocks that have high multiples. High multiples basically means their PE ratio, right? And so when you look at a company's PE ratio, if it's high, that means it's probably going to come back down. It's going to come back down to earth. And so you have to be careful with those, but you just don't buy as much in a market like this. You start a position, maybe you buy 5 shares, maybe you buy 10 shares, maybe you buy 1 share so that you start tracking it, right? And then you say to yourself, okay, this is a stock I want to be committed to over the next couple of years, and you slowly start to add to it. And that helps with, dollar cost averaging, which we did a complete episode on. And so you just have to be in the right mindset to start trying to build your portfolio up. And so it's the same as everything else, right? So the moment for your portfolio, the things that you're doing today and that you continue to do over the next year or whatever, that's why your portfolio is going to look the way that it looks 5 years from now, right? So when I look at my, let me check here. I'm checking my personal numbers here. So when I look at like like I own Apple, right? Personally, I own Apple stock, and my cost basis is $72, right? And it's currently $170 a share. Well, I bought this years ago. Like let me see where I made the first purchase on this for this particular, that's 2014, buying shares in 2014. And so, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So you got to be willing to, broaden your time horizon and think about what are the things that I'm hoping that I own 10 years from now, and get busy. Buy one share. It's okay. You can buy one share now. Nobody's charging you to make a trade. I mean, back then, I think trades were probably $7 a trade. Well, today you can basically do it for nothing, right? So jump on Schwab or wherever you're at, TD Ameritrade or Robinhood or whatever you're using, and don't be afraid to buy one share of something and slowly start building up your portfolio, because in 5 to 6 years, you're going to be really happy that you did this, right? And think about, the time's going to pass anyways, so you got to spend it doing something. So, just keep that in mind. Okay, so the final thing I want to discuss is the show Ozark on Netflix. This was referred to me a couple years ago, and the actress that plays Ruth on there also plays Anna Delvey in the show Inventing Anna, which is a pretty remarkable show about how far somebody can get just pretending to basically fake it till you make it. It's a very interesting, true story. But anyways, in Ozark, I'm watching an episode this week, and she talks about how she curses all the time, so I'm not going to say it exactly how she said it, but she said, man, God made me smart enough to know that I'm in a terrible situation, but not smart enough to get myself out of it, which that quote has stayed with me for just day after day after day. And I know that a lot of people who listen to this podcast are wanting to change their family tree and be the person that changes the family dynamics, right? So to be the person that one day the family looks at and says, man, I'm really glad my grandmother or my grandfather made the choices they did to pull my family out of where we were at. And so I just want you to know that that's possible with the amount of reading that you're doing and the homework that you're doing and betting on yourself. When you're young, you can change your family tree, right? If your family made bad money decisions in the past, you do not have to go down that same path. You can create your own path. And, I deal with a lot of younger people who, feel the pressure of, your family's not always supportive of the choices that you make because it goes against, the choices that they made. And I just want you to know that is totally fine, right? You can make different choices for you and for your future family. And maybe you don't even know who that future family is yet. You don't know who those kids are or what those grandkids are going to look like yet. But I just want you to know that with this community that we're building, you can change your family tree. So with that being said, don't mistake activity for achievement. Go out and have a great week, everybody. I'll see you next time.